All right, Mr. Olaf, welcome back.
Yeah, this is our third time
Yes.
in this adventure of podcasting together. And I feel good about it. And I'm hoping there's a human being or two who bothers to listen.
Yeah, me too. And I think there will be. At least one or two. Yeah, you were asking me about how I'm doing before we got started. And I said, well, there seems to be something about this age that I'm at now where, especially with the types of interests that I had early on, and I said that, at 16 years old, one of the first things I did when I got my license at 16 is I ran up to the bookstore because I wanted to go into the new age and spirituality section, which I kind of felt like it was forbidden. That's just like not something we really even talk about.
The exciting new stuff.
Yes, but I had to go there. And, I started working early in life, so I had money to spend. And, so I ran up, and I think there's a couple books I remember getting, but the most recognizable would have been Carlos Castaneda. It was probably The Teachings of Don Juan. It was the first one. And that set me off on a journey because there was somebody else, and I didn't have any other exposure to somebody talking in this sort of a way. It opened up a doorway within my mind that allowed me to explore. And I think we have a sense for a deeper world within ourselves that we don't really talk about. I think especially maybe children. I remember myself feeling like there's this world that we don't even talk about. We're just, it's almost like the stuff that we talk about or react about it felt like a TV show or a sitcom in a way.
Yeah.
And there was this deeper world that I had access to that no
one would validate by talking about it.
No.
Brush your teeth. Is there a God? Brush your teeth. It's late.
Yeah. And so, I would start picking up these types of books, maybe more esoteric, for lack of a better word, sort of just hidden in plain sight type of.
I like that way of putting it. The spiritual in some ways is hidden, but in plain sight, it's accessible, but not as in an empirical basis.
Sure.
But it's accessible.
Yeah, I was surprised with this memory.
You see it kind of with a third eye. If I may just make a remark, you mentioned that the book by Carlos Castaneda sent me off on a journey. And it reminds me of a couple of books written by a guy named Fenhagen. And his basic theme was, we're not meant to just be wanderers as human beings, but journeyers. And that as a child, we wander. We wonder and we wander, And some of the most basic questions of existence come from children. Why are we? Is the sky real? Who made me? But as we become adult, it's so easy to get captured in functionalism and just live routinely. And then, as the saying goes, come to the end of one's life and say, oh my God, I have not really lived. I've just been caught in the routine, the narrowness of making it in life. The analogy of journeying, we're meant to be journeyers, is to find that deeper pathway of truth for us. And that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I think we do get into these what did you call it? We get into the day-to-day routine. Yeah, we just
The tyranny of the routine.
yeah.
It's one thing to be in grooves, but we get in ruts.
Yeah. And at a certain point, it almost goes, when you get into those sort of routines, you can kind of start wondering, what's the point of this? What is the point of continuing in this manner? Like just survival and getting to the next Christmas, or just the next weekend, or the next football game, or the next whatever it might be. And it doesn't make any sense. But
Well, I'm glad that Alfie can answer that. Remember the song, "What's It All About, Alfie?" Alfie will answer.
what's your answer, huh?
What's your point, Alfie? Actually, we learn from each other. The Alfies, the Andys, the Amoses. In some sense, we sort of get enculturated to living to the point that society says, "Hey, this is the point of living: materialism, hedonism. Get all the stuff you can for yourself, and be for yourself, and just make the best of life as you."
Well, I mean, which kind of leads into a lot of what I want to talk about, because there is a lot going on in the world. What I've been super focused on lately is getting a handle on these drones that are flying over, well, New Jersey and wherever else they're flying, and figuring out what the plausible ideas are behind what that is, and then what the narrative will be spun into, and what the point of that all is. And then, uh, you know, like, for instance, I don't think for a second it's aliens, but that's definitely a dialogue that's happening, and it brings that into discussion because it is at the forefront of our mind. And because 10, 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to talk about aliens in pleasant company, or however you say that, because because we weren't allowed to yet, basically. Is that, if you're not keeping up, this is what we're talking about at all levels of society. Is the UFOs, and this is okay to have conversation about this now, because it's accepted, because we're allowed. It's not just in the realm of sci-fi and movies anymore.
Right.
And though a rational thinking person could think, well, no, this is a very vast universe, and we don't even begin to be able to understand it, beyond the scope of the fishbowl that we do actually can see and understand.
I think sci-fi movies have conditioned us to be open to accepting it as nonfiction, not just fiction. And Star Trek, I'll never forget how disappointed I was when Star Trek was cut off after 2 years, back in 66 and 67. And for 10 years, there was no Star Trek on TV or in the movies. And then at the 10th year point, 1977, came the Star Trek movie with all of the key characters, Captain Kirk and all of the rest of the company. And I was in Madison, Wisconsin at the time, working as a clinician. And I decided to go to the premiere, the opening at midnight. And this is in Madison, Wisconsin. University is, and a huge theater was packed with students and older citizens like me. And whenever a character appeared on the screen, everybody cheered and clapped. And but what it revealed to me was that human hunger, in some sense, that Star Trek be true. That it's not just fiction. That there are perhaps companions out there, but are they benevolent, or are they malevolent, or are they neutral? Forget humans. Why bother with them?
Sure. Um, you know, what I tend to think is that our questions in that manner allow for just show where we are from a consciousness and from a mindset, where our mass consciousness is on a local level, a national level and a worldwide level. And I think our consciousness, of course, is our ability to recognize what's going on here, of course, is based on ignorance, and then whatever we've been fed from movies and things like that. I did learn about the idea of aliens. Actually, Star Trek was the biggest thing that I watched as a kid, but it was like the Next Generation was what I was first introduced to, right? And so it did sort of introduce how these things would go down, that governments would first hide it, and they would cause problems, and there would be power struggles there, and there would be misdirections, and in order to maintain power in certain directions. And so it sort of opened up, it didn't tell you how things could be, but it sort of opened the door to be able to think in this way.
Yes.
To be able to have a critical thinking and not just be dull to it.
And once you use the keyword consciousness, once something opens the door of consciousness from somewhere on the planet, you can't stick the toothpaste back in the tube. You can't, consciousness is like toothpaste. Once it's out, it's there,
The major thing here, and it really what I am looking to promote with this website or this podcast and the other things that we're working on, or I'm working on, is to promote that of all the things going on in the world and are starting to feel like, a little bit overwhelming. It's not just the sort of the world has become a different place in recent years. It doesn't feel nearly as stable as we had led ourselves on to believe that it hadn't come. And I think that from a meta perspective, and what I mean by a meta, a more divine perspective, a higher consciousness perspective, is that an opportunity is being given. And I'll say it this way at first, and we'll go into a couple other ways of saying it, but an opportunity is being given in order to raise our conscious vibrations, to raise our consciousness, to raise our level of awareness, to step outside of the garbage that we fill our mental space with, into just to step out of the ignorance of infancy as a species or as a culture, maybe not even a species. Who knows how people, the level of awareness people had before us, but they did quite some pretty fantastic things that we don't know how they did it thousands of years ago. So, culturally, I think we're being offered an opportunity to advance our consciousness, which I think is the point of what's happening.
Yeah.
I think it is the storyline.
Hopefully so. It reminds me of a group of scholars at the turn of the millennia, around 2000, some years before. I don't have all the details down, but they were doing epochal studies, and I think this was maybe in Purdue or Ohio State. Number of scholars. They were looking at epochs of humankind and what kind of paradigms, what kind of basic assumptions was in shared consciousness. And an author who, I'd have to refer to the book and the author, I can't do it right off the top of my head right now, but he kind of summarized what they were talking about and looking at what's going on, like you are, what's going on, and looking ahead. And interestingly, this is around the year 2000-ish, that it seemed like our culture was basically teenage, adolescent, and they kind of spelled it out in terms of materialism, me, kind of finding my identity, and when some of the themes I remember off the top of my head, but they projected that in the next couple to few decades is going to be an epochal, fundamental shift from teenagehood to early adulthood. And that early adulthood would be getting to more serious thinking, more relational thinking. Now that I know who I am, who are you? Who are we? But some of the optimism that I read in that book some 20 plus years ago has not been fulfilled. That, if anything, one could say we might have regressed to infancy. And that sounds like horribly snooty and critical. And I don't mean it in that way. I am talking about, we always are children. Like a psychologist said long ago, I was at a workshop. She said, remember, and every person is a scared 2-year-old, no matter what their age. There's a scared 2-year-old. So we all have neoteny. Their philosophy says we have a child consciousness, an inner child that continues to live inside of us all the rest of our lives. And how we treat that inner child, implicatively or directly, has such bearing on whether we feel safe and comfortable to grow like you're talking about, or if we regress and begin to hide ourselves and hide in conformity to culture. Best way to hide is to be visibly hiding. Just be a bot of culture.
A bot of culture.
Yeah. Don't think for yourself more deeply, but like you're saying, we have so much access now to, higher consciousness, to call the esoteric, the transformative consciousness. And, you might say the science of spirituality, not just the art of it.
Yeah. A bot of culture. You know what that makes me think of? I had been considering, social media in general, it shows social media in general that it was not something that I could normally post on until somewhat recently, because it just sort of these leftover unworthiness feelings that I started with, I say from childhood, but that makes it sound like I'm blaming my parents. I'm not. I'm nobody's victim. I never have been. It took me a long time to figure that out, but I'm nobody's victim. I designed my life. In my I don't know about everybody else, but I designed my life. So what I was thinking was, man, all right, there's lots of things. There's a certain subset of things that will actually post on a social media platform, and I'm thinking of Facebook in particular, just because that's the format I'm most familiar with, and it seems like people in my age group are most active on is Facebook, and so there's certain things that I'll talk with somebody, with the average person, about, like aliens and UFOs and the potential of that, but I sure as hell am not going to post it. For in recent history. I think Facebook's been out since the early 2000s or whatever, 2006 or so.
What's that like to be engaging in Facebook? You say the people your age do a lot of interacting by Facebook. What is that really like? Because I don't. I do a little bit, but not very much. What would like to do more?
And this is no slight towards it, but it what it reminds me of is that I have this childhood vision, and I described it earlier today already, is about how we're just talking about the cursory things, and we're not talking about this whole bigger, infinitely larger world below that. And that's what it feels like. For me. And it's not to slight it. You can't, certain things are for certain things. Like,
Right.
what am I trying to say? Like, you don't go to the shoe store for pants, I guess. You don't go to AA.
Deep philosophical conversation.
Yeah, but
Share a recipe.
now, okay, so yes, generally speaking. However, and to like people like to share, like, here's a picture of me on vacation. Here's a picture of my kids. Here's the meal I'm eating. Here's me having fun, and that's what it feels like. Now, that's not to say that people discuss politics and they discuss all types of things, like that, and but there's a certain, there's like the illusion of choice.
The illusion
of choice is like, okay, here is what's acceptable as far as what is acceptable to talk about the range of possibility of something, and so beyond that, what happens outside of the range of what we have the ability to accept right now culturally, or in this particular format, or what we've been told we're allowed to think about, is that, anything outside of that is generally invisible or ridiculed. It's the same as, just, I suppose it's been for history, just in this different format.
You used a key phrase that really is hooking my interest and concern. You used the expression illusion of choice. In some sense, the premise then is, if it truly is an illusion, we're really not free.
Yeah.
Because freedom is predicated on the idea that there's a range of choices. Creature kind basically live by instinct, operate by instinct. It means they already have a pre-programmed, learned ability to just act. But of course the creature has a little range of choice. Do I go to the right to eat, or do I go to the left to eat? But the instinct is I gotta eat. There's no question.
Right.
That kind of thing. In philosophy, when I read that basic question, about free will and freedom, I like the philosophers who say, no, we human beings have choices. And in fact, isn't a deeper consciousness that we're talking about predicated on the idea that we can even choose a deeper framework of meaning, a more substantial platform of meaning, or to go back to the journey image, we have the choice to choose a meaningful, powerful kind of journey versus giving up on that and just going on a narrow journey because society says that's the good thing to do. Go middle class and just enjoy making as much money as you can have and buy a bigger house as you can and nicer car as you can and get along with your kids and your friends and pay your taxes, etc. Not that that's bad, not by no means. But I remember my friend, I might have said this before in a podcast, so I don't want to over repeat. But after working 17 years in the corporate world, a good college friend of mine and his mate, Paul and Lois, they looked at their lives and said, how do we feel about how we're living in the early 40s? Is it working? He in the corporate world, she was a manager of a small office, two very bright people. And they looked at their life and said, no, it gets to your phrase. How do I design my life? Paul and Lois said, hey, do we like this design of our lives that have been kind of given by the culture in the work world? No, they divested their assets, bought a van and traveled across the country and camped during a whole year, talking to people and just taking their time to re-feel into life, to re-feel into meeting new people and being in new places, and etc. Is kind of like divorcing themselves from their stuckness of space and giving themselves time to really explore. And they loved the adventure so much, they added a half year. But they didn't have much money left to add another half year. So they added a little work. He did a little bit of tutoring and substitute teaching here and there, and she did waitressing. And when they came back, then they asked, okay, are we ready to settle into a new design of living? She went to graduate school and finished a degree and went on to professional work in professional landscaping architecture. He went back and got a master's in working with early disabled young adults. And they loved their new life and their work. I mean, they expressed that deep freedom that we can design our lives, redesign our lives. And spirituality is an empowerment that helps us to look at our lives and ask the question, is this the best I can be and the best I can do, not only for myself, but for others? Love yourself and love your neighbor kind of thing?
Sure. Huh.
That's a mouthful, I know.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it is. I think it's sold to us, or we sell it to ourselves. There's our languaging is really set up for victimhood. I think it's I think we've sold it, but really we designed this. If you just look at it from a perspective of the mass consciousness and the fractal nature of consciousness, is that we are sort of a node at the end. We don't exist in a vacuum. We don't exist separate from the whole. We exist as a node of a whole back. Just we on this planet are very connected at a very close level consciously, and I think we sell it to ourselves where we are at in our culturally or evolutionarily, as that this is just the next step in human advancement and human evolution. This is what it looks like. It's just this is what human advancement looks like. It's not what we've chosen to do. It's just what human advancement is.
Yeah, and that, to me, as a theologian, not only as a psychologist, human advancement, yes, in scientifically, in the natural sciences, in the human sciences, we understand so much about human experience and the natural world. We're getting closer and closer to the originating point, closer to the Big Bang, supposedly, by way of astronomical manipulation, if you will, astronomical models, which I don't understand, but I'm awed by. But have we advanced ethically? Do the Cains still murder Abel? To go to the early Genesis biblical reference of how humans treat each other, human advancement ethically. And what about human advancement environmentally? There are, in environmental thinking and science, they speak about the 9 boundaries. Trees, water, air are 3 of them, soil 4, etc. 9 boundaries. And 6 of them are highly endangered. They're in the warning orange zone. Bah, 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 bah. Cutting trees, cutting the breath, cutting the lung of the planet. You're cutting the lung of the planet. Bah, bah, bah.
Wait a minute. This is 9 boundaries of what is it?
Environmental areas of major consideration impact, like trees, air, water, soil, species kind. My mind is not going precisely into that. I mean, I can bring it next time, and there is a whole wonderful map about that. But the point here is, on the one hand, we can talk about human advancement like you are probing, in the esoteric area. And yes, and we have so advanced in understanding the dynamics of spirituality apart from religious constructs. It's kind of like the parallel I thought of is like our mentality. We are cognitive beings as well as spiritual beings. Our mentality is not tied to one philosophical system like Platonism. You must be a dualist. No. What about Stoicism? And what about Epicureanism? Schools of thought. But our thinking ability is not linked and weaved by necessity to one school of thought. We can have many schools of thought. And when we talk about spirituality, it isn't contingent upon one religious construct. You losing it?
Yeah, well, I can get it back though. That's what we're gonna do, yeah. We got the audio.
You have the audio. Good.
We have the audio. So, but
So that
want to.
that wasn't clipped.
No, the audio's still going right now. We're in the new studio. We're working out the bugs.
Right.
So what happened on this is the storage became full on the iPad.
Oh,
which is just a backup. It shouldn't have stopped the recording because each of the cameras has their own storage, which is more than adequate. So, like I said, we just gotta work out the bugs.
Now, when you open the door, does that affect?
Well,
It's a little hot in here.
see, it's getting hot, and that's one of the bugs. We'll work that out first.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got the window too, and let's turn this off. Yeah, and are you gonna open the window?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Just need a little flow.
Sure.
I'm good. Thanks.
So. Now, do you remember what you were talking about?
Oh yeah.
I can.
Oh yeah.
If you want to keep flowing, I can lay over pictures of something while you're
Sure.
speaking.
Sure. So what I was saying is, I was sort of responding to the phrase human advancement, and I want to say, on a natural science level, awesome, godlike, creator-like advancement. We know the genome. We know the particularities of what makes me me. I went to one of the services to find out where does my, in a sense, what is my DNA home? And I was surprised to find out that from a DNA perspective, the elements of who I am from the physical heritage point of view is I am very Baltic. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, from that part of the world. On the eastern side of the Baltic Sea, on the western side is Sweden and Norway, to map it verbally in front of people. And yes, I was born in Riga, Latvia. My mother's father was fully Latvian, though her mother was half German. And my father was Russian, Polish, and maybe had some Baltic in him. So I thought, oh, I'm a mixture of the Russian Polish and the German and the Latvian. Not so. Not according to DNA science. I am very Baltic. And I quit. No wonder I like hoops and cars. Because the Latvians love cars.
Okay.
They love sedans.
And basketball, right?
And basketball. You know, when you think about it, some really good. I mean, come on, in the NBA, there are some Latvians.
Sure, absolutely.
Who, you know, and off the top of my head, you know, the son of a center who played for Portland a long time. I can't think of the name, but anyway. So, but human advancement ethically, but human advancement spiritually, absolutely. And part of the advancement has been to dislodge spirituality from the religious sphere as such. It's like taking our human thinking ability and dislodging it from philosophical systems and affirming our thinking ability as an incredible human ability in and of itself.
Sure.
And likewise with spirituality. It isn't linked to religious constructs and narratives intrinsically. And so we have the combination of psychology and spirituality, as well as theology and spirituality. That's what my profession is about. You know, I can articulate theological truths from a biblical perspective. I can articulate psychological truths from the discipline of counseling psychology. And I can definitely speak meaningfully about spiritual truths, if you will, small t. Because, you know, of some decades of work in that area, just out of pure interest.
Sure.
Who are we spiritually, not just psychologically, socially, physically, situationally? You know, do we transcend time and space in our consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely we do.
Well, that's what happens is that anything that you spend a lot of time with, that, you know, I think in general, we'll just take spirituality for instance, is, you know, you can sort of muse about things and say, oh, that's a neat idea, and then sort of put it on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
But as you know, there's only so much time in the day, and there's so many wonderful things to explore in existence. But, you know, with regard to this exactly, if you spend decades working on it and studying it and experimenting, as both you and I have, is that you, with this realm, as you start to, for me, what's coming to mind is you start to come out of the realm of, oh, that's nice, and you go through a series of you go through until what becomes important is, how can this be used to improve the lives of people?
Absolutely. Thank you.
You know, otherwise,
That's our intent. Yes.
Well, otherwise, what's the point?
Yes. Yes. And again, you know, it's interesting. I probably have said this in the previous 2 podcasts, but one of the fundamental principles of living in joy, and not superficial happiness coming into me, but that inner joy coming out of me. And one of the elements, 8 key elements of joyful, meaningful, joyous living is generosity, the giving to others for their sake. You know, and our brains, neuroscience has also established that there is a neurological substructure that is wired to give us all kinds of pleasure and ability in being generous. No wonder we're happy in this Christmas season, because instead of thinking so much about ourselves, we're thinking about our others. How can I gift my loved ones? How do I gift my friends? At least gift with a party, you know. And sometimes some of the most delightful gifts between work colleagues is a surprising little something, you know, like a little squirrel statue, because your colleague 2 months ago talked about being so fascinated with squirrels and decided to take out library books on squirrels, and you remember that, and you have a giving attitude, you think, hey, he might or she might really love a squirrel. I'm going to give him or her a squirrel. It's that connectivity in thinking of others with the spirit of generosity and giving.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that see, what's tying together there for me is that, well, there's a lot of different directions, but
Absolutely.
the first thing I'm thinking of is the judgment. Yeah, I've been putting this. I've been working on this one for some time, and that's one of the things that I enjoy doing is playing with different models in my mind and doing sort of these exercises within my own consciousness.
Man, absolutely.
And one of the models that I have right now is that, so speaking back on on this concept that what we're being called to do, from a very practical level and from a very from a very high, I don't know, I'm losing the word, but like a divine level, a psychological level, an emotional level, what we're being
Sacred level.
a sacred level. There it is. What we're being called to do is raise our consciousness.
Oh, absolutely.
And because we can't, we have to become a new level human in order to handle the challenges that we're facing. It's sort of how it's sort of how things work, isn't it? Like that is what spurs you to change or extinction.
Right.
You either change and evolve, or you go bye-bye. That's it.
Right. And we're kind of on the cusp. I was talking about environmentalism, and just to say one more time, right now, the planetary systems, commercial, materialistic planetary systems, are acting in ways that is tearing the fabric of life, the planetary life, apart. It's like a sweater. One little thread goes, you pull it out, the sweater's fine. But 2 threads, 3 threads, 4 and more, where does the integrity of the sweater begin to lose its vitality? And like that, we are stripping the planetary life system. And so, and this is a new level of consciousness. Environmentalism is a level of consciousness that is so unavoidable and pervasive, but for a lot of people, facing the truth of the environmental destructive patterns we're in is too threatening, so they go to denialism, conspiratorialism, or just plain not paying attention-ism.
Sure.
And because it's so overwhelming to say, what? We humans have to save the planet? But environmental science says, yes, and we can do it. We know how to do it. That's what I find so frustrating in teaching environmentalism, because one of my formal designations as an associate professor, like you introduced in the first podcast, at Ecumenical Theological Seminary in Detroit, my formal designation is Associate Professor in Urban and Environmental Studies. I'm not pretending to be an expert in environmentalism, though I created a class, on environmental ministry, as we call it, making faith communities conscious of environmentalism or what they can do to spread the consciousness. It's getting back to what you're emphasizing. Consciousness, becoming aware and awake, and aware and awake to the degree that we act. Aware, awake, and acting, But the power systems that only think about next quarter's profits are threatened by a longer range view. And when we talk about corporate responsibility, no. The purpose of the corporation is to make a profit on a quarterly basis. Don't bother us with other considerations other than the economic factors that advantage us.
Sure.
And that kind of thinking, to go back to your rich phrase, is not human advancement. It's human regression. You're right. We are meant to continue to move forward in our consciousness. But power systems, when they have so much advantage, want to keep it, want to hold back from moving forward.
Right.
And that's our struggle right now. Does that make sense?
Oh, that makes perfect sense. And and that seems to be the part of this that I'm hyper focused on currently, because and that just means to me that I'm trying to get a handle on the perspective, not what the right perspective is or the wrong perspective. I don't necessarily believe in that whole thing. It's like picking the right religion or picking the right politics or I don't. I think that's nonsense.
Yeah.
It's more is getting the scope of the story as we know it.
I like that expression.
Yeah. And how much information can I collect? And this comes down to judgment. Really within the scope of my consciousness. And that, with regard to raising mindset, it's just a quick note. This idea that I don't know if I grew up with it or it was just naturally, but I remember back in the day trying to pick the right religion. Which is the right religion? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and the thing, and I even had that same mindset with regard to politics. Which is the right party? Which is the right way to view this policy?
And that's so human to ask that. Which is the right way? Again, it gets back to what I said in the beginning, to accommodate ourselves to culture.
Right.
We're social creatures, so it's natural to say, what's the right way so I can be good in the group?
Right. And that's exactly the thinking, is that what's going to facilitate my is staying and fitting into the group even, better, or at least as well as I have been.
And then when you read Carlos Castaneda and no one else does, like, we're social animals, but it seems like I have deviated. What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Thank goodness for sacred deviation.
Thank goodness for deviation. And we're not, we're very trained, very conditioned. We have very conditioned ourselves. You would think that the conditioning of wanting to stay in the group has to be something evolutionarily from, this vessel which we are sort of embodying and using, that the conditioning of that through its genetic structure in order to survive has been that we have to be part of the group. And yet I would say that, some of the most celebrated people that we have are the ones that are quite the opposite of that, the ones that sort of escape that, needing to be part of the group, at least in whatever their mode of expression might be. I'm thinking about artists in general.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's boy, you triggered so many feelings and thoughts when you said the word artist.
Yeah.
Even in the Philosophy Now magazine, there have been some credible professional philosophers who have written and stated up front, imagination is more important in the whole human experiment and enterprise than reason. It's not that reasoning is not important, but imagining even more so. And what blew me away when the dean of my educational institution, and her, a wonderful woman, a wonderful PhD sister, and Adrian's sister, Annalise Sinot. And she, many years back, she said, Olaf, you've got to read this book on, and here's a fancy term, pneumatology. Okay, if you say so. I always trusted her. If she says, read X, I'll read X. Read Y, I'll read Y. And pneumatology, simply put, is deeper thinking about sacred spirit, or the Holy Spirit, as we say in Christian parlance. And the basic thesis of the book is this: the sacred humanizes us through the arts. And think about it. Yesterday on TV was the Kennedy annual Kennedy Honors Show, and they honor a handful of people who have given artistically of themselves in a powerful way that has influenced culture, not just for a couple of years, but for decades, and I'm so glad for that. And one of the groups was a Grateful Dead, but I'm not going to hold to my memory of the exact detail, but it shows that. And when I think about what we do imaginatively and creatively, it's through the arts. The sacred humanizes us through dance and theater and paintings and sculpture, etc., etc. Songs, especially poetry, and and that is what has humanized me. I was kind of a moody, insecure kid in college, and being such, one of the moments that sort of I kind of did self-therapy, at midnight, I would sneak off to the music, rooms that were kind of set away. So playing the piano at midnight, and I would just play improvisational mood music, as it were, on the piano to therapize myself, And it was nice to do it. It was not because, I figured things out. No, I didn't figure anything out, but just deeply felt better.
Sure.
It's like the music carried my soul and my spirit and psyche to a better place.
Sure.
And again, art humanizes us. And it's interesting that art therapy is one of the key modalities for children. Children aren't cerebral and wordy for the most part. Oh, but they feel it. It's in their bodies. So give them a chance to artistically reveal it.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think this is a sneaky one. All right.
I like that, sneaky.
Yeah. So I keep going back to judgment, and I'm really trying to figure out how to tie this together, because that was beautifully put. There is that is the space within my own consciousness that I'm looking to stay aligned with.
Yeah.
The as you describe it there.
Yeah.
And what I recognize, and I want to be, I want to give sort of practical, actionable suggestions as to like how to move forward into that sort of a space, if you're getting that vibe of what we're talking about. And what is hitting for me right now, and I just keep calling it judgment. And I think, and that's what I'm talking about when I say this is a sneaky one, because I think from one perspective, there is this, we recognize that judging people is bad. That's not a good thing, right? But then how I've been applying it, right? And you could get even silly about the intricacies of that, is like, well, that is a bad person, they kill people, or this is a good person, they do saintly acts. Or so
was judgment entirely bad?
Well, okay, here's what let me be specific before we throw a blanket on it, but I am throwing a blanket on it to a certain extent, is that within my psyche, within my consciousness, there is something that I'm calling judgment, which I can tell you takes me away from where I want to be.
Okay.
So, now this whole thing of, which is the right religion?
by definition, is judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to figure out what the right viewpoint, and now forget religion. Now think of anything. We are hyper obsessed with having the right, or the how would you put it, where it's like the unassailable position.
Okay.
Where we can say, I'm the one that's right.
Right.
I'm the righteous one here.
Nice expression. Unassailable position.
The unassailable position, where I can, it's the defensible position where I can say, I have the biggest castle, and I don't know. I'm just getting this vision of you down there. I'm the king, and I'm going to pour oil on you, and I am the righteous Lord here, and because I have the right position, I've thought this through. But anything that gets me even close to that, just the tiny, minutest detail within my psyche that puts me in a position of judging something as right or wrong, from the most minute detail to the largest thing, as opposed to looking at it from a universal consciousness of it, to put it simply, it simply is. This is beingness being. This is God. This is God doing God. This is the verbing of existence, and this is it. Now, here's another thing I would even tie it into, is the knowledge of the how do you say, the knowledge of the tree of good and evil? The knowledge of the
Yes. Knowledge of the tree of good and evil.
Now,
The Genesis story.
here's what I like. Somebody now. People will. I love investigating sort of these different ways of different interpretations of this. And one interpretation that I heard is that they're talking about the knowledge of the tree of good and evil is the conscious mind. And I didn't get this fella's name.
It's more than that.
Well, okay. Well, that's why I'm throwing it at you. And so as the conscious mind, and sort of, this is sort of what has to be let go of or given away in tithing. He started to tithe into it. And now, whether or not this is what is actually meant, it gets the juices flowing, anyways. And so I'm glad I brought it up. I can't go very far with that part of it. I'm glad I brought it up because it'll get you going, but
not too far.
But the idea is that the work in the conscious mind is great. It's a good calculator. But if you try to run the world and run your life from your calculator, it's not going to work out so well. There is a much broader information available, and this is this is something that I run into a lot over the course of my lifetime when talking with friends, is that, especially guys, is that there's this thing that I want to, and I'll let you talk about that, but I wanted to get the full scope of what I was talking about here. Is that there needs to be a distinction drawn between a lot of these things that we sort of lump into this idea of feeling. That's your feelings. Like, because we want to stick to this is an intellect, and this is what I do, this is what men do. And that's great. That's not, I feel very identified in my masculinity. However, staying there is, at a certain point, is a protective mechanism.
Yeah.
It is very much not courageous to not explore outside of that.
Yes.
And so the courage comes from exploring this other realm, which is accessible only when you see past that intellect, see past the interference pattern that the ego runs in order to get you to sort of say, there's nothing to see here. This is how things are, and this is what the world is, and this is what reality is. And
here is the judgment of what things are, and there's nothing else to see, and there's so much more to see
Absolutely.
and into it, and
Yeah. I like the expression inner courage to explore. When you talked about male differentiation from female, it does remind me of John Gray's book. It was a very popular book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And basically, he was saying, and I also took a whole full day workshop out in California with him, and it was fun and illuminating in some ways, but he can also be criticized for being kind of sexist in terms of gender construction. To be woman is this X, to be man is Y, or whatever. But what he was saying is women go to the well of floating in emotions. Men go to the cave to get platonic here. Plato talks about the cave image, that most people are stuck in only looking at shadows on the wall of a cave. They don't really see reality. They have to step out of the cave of their given consciousness, go beyond their consciousness into the light to really see what reality is about. So, Plato is kind of cool that way, But anyway, men go to the well too. Come on. We feel pain. We feel compassion, we cry when we're extra happy, and we cry when we're extra sad. And women can be highly rational, and they can be tough, and I take John Gray to sort of in a playful way, but not as a basic way of understanding male and female. But to get back, if I may just for a moment say something about knowing the tree of good and evil. That is still a lifelong project for me, to understand it, to understand good and evil deeply. I'm currently working on it. I am interested in reading Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, for example. I think I maybe touched on it in college, but as a college kid, I wasn't ready for that deep kind of thinking about good and evil. Good is a beautiful gal to go on a date with. Evil is when she says no. That kind of thing, But okay, to the Jewish mind, to the Hebrew mind, and this is oversimple, but it's to know something. To know is to be able to do, but it's not even just to do, but to do rightly. So to be a mechanic and know how to fix your engine on your truck, if you can do that to get the truck running, you really know. Now, if you work on your engine and you don't know how, you're being a fool. And the wisdom literature uses the word fool to kind of designate when people are into streams of what they think is knowing, but it's not, because it ain't working. In other words, there is an ethical substructure to the universe, a right way and a wrong way, a good way and a bad way. And we humans have been given the consciousness to eat of thinking what's good and what's evil. But here's the enigma. We can think it and think we know it, but in the Hebrew mind, you don't know it. You're still doing evil, humans. You genocidal ruler are attacking Ukraine and bombing its hospitals and schools and killing children just because you want some more land or don't believe they deserve to exist because they're not really Russian. I mean, we continue to do wars, and we continue to do violence. And then we really think there's nothing about that incredibly important phrase, knowing good and evil. Simply put, we can abstractly know it, but for some reason, it is so hard to do it. But biblical spirituality is about empowering people to overcome evil with good. That's the point. And good in what? Good in terms of that the sacred is love, and those who live in the sacred love live in the sacredness, and the sacredness is in them. Love, justice, mercy, humility, these are not just nice words, religious words. They are elements of human experience that when we do them, we're doing the good. But why did Creator in that story warn human, don't eat of this? You know, and of course it's kind of provocative because sometimes myths aren't designed to be philosophical explanations, but to say that it is, Humans know good and evil, but they struggle to do it. Schindler's List is a fabulous movie because it is about human degradation and the massive evil of racist-based genocide. And then Schindler has, a list of people saved under threat, and so the struggle of good and evil continues. And the whole thing about environmentalism, to attend to these 9 boundaries as a human community is good. To continue to pretend that the environmental problems, limits don't exist is evil.
Mhm.
And what is good? It promotes life and life's flourishing. What is evil? It destroys life and shrinks it. Evil, by definition in Scripture, destroys life and shrinks it. Good enhances life and expands upon it. And to go to your basic commitment to higher consciousness, you're seeking to add to human goodness, because you and I know that higher consciousness helps people to feel life and experience life more richly, more deeply, more fully. Overcome evil with good. It's very enigmatic. And and one more comment. Scholars say, even though the Bible, all the biblical books, talk about evil, they do not explain why. Why? Couldn't we just have a tree of good, very good, medium good, and not so good? Couldn't we have 3 or 4 differentiated fruits? Did it have to be? I'm working on philosophical, theological answers, but I won't go there right now.
Mhm.
Why good and evil? Why? Why?
Well, see, I can tell you what I think on those terms, is that due to not only just, like I said, spending time in this area, but also lots of meditation and some degree of hallucinogens, I, I,
Sounds like it's good for you.
well, it is. I do, what's it even called? Ketamine, like a prescription.
Okay.
And so at first, when I first started taking that, that would give me a hallucinogenic effect. And after a very short time, it really doesn't, you become desensitized to it.
Okay.
But it still allows for sort of a lightening of the load of the mental load. But when it did give a hallucinogenic effect, it allowed me to get to this place within my mind enough times so that I can't remember if I talked about this before, but there's this you could call these states of mind, but I don't call them states because I think that that's a sort of a watering down of what it is. I think we're traveling through dimensions with our awareness, to put it quite simply. And so we're traveling through the dimensions of our own beingness, our individualized beingness and our universal beingness. And so as I travel into a place that is unfeathered or unfettered by this earthly, this mortal coil, I come to a place where I just am. I simply am. I exist. I've come to the point where, not even induced by ketamine, simply from sleeping, from meditation, from looking at a sunset, I've come to points where I've forgotten who I was. Forgotten. The conditioning of self drops away.
Yeah.
And you are in that state of beingness and knowingness. And this is where I've been here enough times so that I think the first time that I have visited this dimension of beingness was in the early 90s, and then maybe it was the late 90s before it happened again, and I started to think, boy, was I just high? Was I just imagining things? And then over the decades, it is slowly the frequency became higher and higher to where I would have these experiences till today. I can tell you that I spend more than half of the day in this state. And I have to work at it still. I go out. That's part of the reason I go on walks every day. I spend
Me too.
most of my time very much working on this in the same way as if I was a top athlete. This is what I spend my time doing.
Yeah.
And but so I come at things from that level, and I think that my perception in that area is that me has always existed. I can't. I don't believe that it was ever born, nor will it ever die. It's never hurt. It's not affected. It simply is, and it witnesses this realm, and it to some extent it co-creates, or it decides to live out this life for a divine prerogative, we'll say for now. But I think we give ourselves from that dimension of mind. We have to give, when we fall into the density and we forget who we are, we forget our own divinity, we forget our own connection to infinity. We have to give ourselves and set up certain symbols. We set up sort of simplified ways.
Yeah.
Now, there is no more perfect way of giving an example of those symbols that we give ourselves than simply the idea and the words good and evil. This is, and for the reasons that you said, good is something that expands us, or I would describe
Enhances life.
I would describe.
So we flourish.
I would describe it as it brings us towards who we truly are.
Yes.
And evil is something that brings us away from who we truly are.
Yes, that's part of it. It's a multifactorial, multivariant picture, but that's very much the core. Let me plug in and kind of join right into your stream of thought here.
Sure.
I experienced naturally through you might say my mystical self, what people experience through using hallucinogens. You might call me a natural hallucinogenic human, if you know what I mean. And my model, you might call it anthropological spirituality, is that the core I am indeed is one that mirrors the sacred I am. And I've said this before. Yahweh, the term used for the sacred in the biblical books, is a verb. I am being what I am being. It's pure I am being what I'm being. It is not like, oh, I'm this substance. I'm holy Plato. And now you must understand my whole, and play with religious Plato to sort of mirror who I am as the holy Plato, not Plato, but Play-Doh, not Plato, holy Play-Doh. No. It's almost like we barnacle ourselves with all kinds of imposed ways of being human.
Sure.
From society, from gender constructs, from our friends, from our family. We interject our family. In part, we repeat the dramas of our mothers and fathers, and we repeat the dramas of our siblings, and then we have to get it all along in the work world, and we have to negotiate our way. Personas. We have to have this persona to get along in the work world. But then when I go to bars at night to meet someone, and have some fun, I'm a different persona. When I'm with my brother or sister, different persona. We are a conglomerate of personas. And it's so easy to lose our center in the busyness of moving daily through life, shifting from one persona here and impressing people another persona here and protecting myself, etc., etc. And you're right. When we give ourselves time to breathe and center and go into the seventh chakra, the Kundalini energy, and tune into what Carlos Castaneda said is sort of like this invisible portal.
Mm-hmm.
This invisible portal that is illuminated to an open spirit, an open mind and heart. And then when we get that illumination through an open mind and heart, we experience our inner verbness. I am being. I am being. I am not called to substantiate myself essentially, but I have to give substance in society through my personas. So it's kind of, we're both masks. We wear masks. And in some sense, thank goodness, those masks both reveal who we are. Persona, professor, okay, Olaf he can talk smartly and so on. But Olaf also knows in the back porch of me how dumb I am, how little I know, you know?
Sure.
So I am being persona-wise kind of smart, but deep in my being, I am also being so dumb about existence. And that humility to recognize that on the backside, while I express my gifts on the front side, that is actually one of the pillars of joy, one of the fundamental premises which makes us joyful creatures is humility.
Mm-hmm.
Because when my toes are in the soil, the humus, I'm more likely to get it than if my head is in the clouds.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think there is something that has to happen within you in order to be able to have humility, because there is some sort of foundational safety almost that has to happen in order, at this point in my life, I can say that I really can, there's a humility there. I can laugh at myself, with myself or with other people.
Yeah.
Just
It's a good way to describe humility.
Yeah. It's just
there's a reason to laugh at ourselves.
the ability to not get upset at your behavior.
Yeah.
At how you've acted or whatever. The ability to forgive your own transgressions and your own inabilities to get whatever it is done that you wanted to get done, or your faults. Faults might not even be the right word, but to not judge.
Yeah, I was just thinking you're on the track again of the word judgmental, and the implication of what you just said. You're talking about judgmentalism that attacks the very integrity of your being. Don't be you. How dare you love Castaneda?
Right.
Read stuff on how to build pools better, Fix your engine. Forget this mumbo jumbo, Yeah. That kind of judgmentalism cripples us and also feeds addiction, in the sense that, as Charles Whitfield in his, he was a kind of an addictionologist, bringing together psychiatry and addiction and deep thinking about it and deep understanding. And addiction is fed when we judge our true selves away and live by false consciousness.
Yeah, I would have to.
So you're judging ourselves away.
Yep.
And live by false consciousness.
Addiction is fed that way.
Or in the words of John Bradshaw, who was a hot speaker, and he wrote the book on shame, that addiction is basically a product of shame-based identity.
Yep.
In other words, it's not like guilt. I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake and don't really deserve to live. And if I deserve to live, at least not as my true me.
Yep. Can I get a witness? Yes, I can be a witness for that.
Yeah.
Yep. That is definitely, yeah. And boy, I was thinking the other day, there have been times before. We all face this to a certain degree, but there is a certain resentment you can get, especially as you age. And if you're constantly just dumping on yourself within your own psyche because you can't, and I think this happens a lot, the more sort of extraordinary. I'm thinking of other. I'm thinking of certain people in my life who maybe dump on themselves more than others, but have extraordinary talents at the same time
Yes.
that don't sort of fit into. I mean, who fits in anymore? To be honest, we are a culture who is starting to find that, is starting to really realize, there is no normal. Finally, we've been saying it for a long time, but I think we're starting to really accept that fact at a deeper level. Now with each other, but maybe not yet with ourselves.
Normal. Yeah, that's, I mean, some people might look at a kind of fundamental cultural substream, like an undercurrent, and the postmodern undercurrent that we're in. We're beyond modernism, modernity. We're into postmodernity. And that means there is no normal. There is no standard. It's kind of like what we decide to be normal, what we decide to be standard. Hence, we have language like this, alternate facts.
Okay, so yeah, I would agree.
Postmodern narrative.
That's the postmodernism.
Absolutely.
Okay. I mean, so I think that's still, there is no normal, but there is, because that's the illusion of choice that I'm talking about. That is the normal. And I think, and then just quickly, and I'll let you go on, is that what that makes me think of, what it starts to make me think of, is what we're allowed to think of because of what the powers that be allow us to think of. The illusion of choice. I think it's determined on high. So, for instance, UFOs. Why is that all of a sudden okay to think about? Because we were told officially,
Oh, sure.
that it's okay to think about it. And it really becomes like, oh, I knew that there is a certain level of that going on, but we're told what to think, and we're, and not even if we break free of that. I can't go, and that's what I was talking about with Facebook. I can't go on Facebook and talk about certain things,
Right.
because you just look like an idiot.
Yeah.
There's
One way that I think about and talk about is the public operant consciousness. And public operant consciousness has all kinds of guardrails about what we dare talk about and say and think and what we don't. Public operant consciousness. And as you pointed out long ago in our discussion today, there was a time when public operant consciousness did not allow us to talk about UFOs. You'd either be thrown in jail or the nut house, or just dismissed by culture, just saying he's a nutcase. He believes in aliens. And now, of course, in our public operant consciousness, that way of talking, it's kind of like a mental menu. A restaurant of ideas doesn't have all the menus of the world. There's a certain menu. So Italian thinking or Irish thinking, or Polish thinking or Russian thinking or the variant American thinking, the rich salad bowl kind of image, So I don't want to go too crazy here, but I really relate to what you're saying. Part of the liberation of spiritual consciousness is that we can go deeper than what public operant consciousness allows. We can go higher and more transcendent than public consciousness realizes. There is a simple little story about people who lived in a valley, in a village, and they were called flatlanders. And they believed that The public operant consciousness was the world is flat, life is flat, we are flat, the flatlanders.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a few people like you and me, intuitives, interested in, higher consciousness, just following through on the idea that there's more than what we say is flatly allowed. And guess what? We go to the mountain of consciousness and we realize, no, reality is a spiral. There is a deeper truth and there is a higher truth. And what seems flat is just in a moment of spiraling. But we don't have to spiral to experience higher consciousness. We have the ability to be ahead of where flatland consciousness is, and we can go deeper to the substratum of where flatland consciousness was.
Yeah.
And to say, hey, let's look back at what Plato had to say, these deep thinking Greek philosophers who, in a sense, opened up humanism in human thinking, And then biblical consciousness also picked up on that with Hebrew consciousness. So you have a mix of, ancient Greek consciousness and ancient Hebrew consciousness, and creating a new kind of consciousness that we call Christianity. A simple way of talking about it. But when we speak of higher consciousness, we know that reality is not two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional, but we can go with Stephen Hawkins and think it may be 11-dimensional to 13-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, yeah. I think so many more of us now are like on the individual human level. So many more people now than during I don't really know this, but I would imagine so many more people now than during the era of Plato, which was couple thousand BC. Plato was, I can't even remember.
Pardon me for not.
Yeah, it's okay. Plato and Socrates, I think,
they were in the BC world.
Yeah.
Going back. I'm embarrassed to say I can't tag the exact.
Well, it's one of them things. It's like you knew it at one point, but how you can't have every fact available.
Go to the modern Almighty. You know the name of the modern Almighty, right?
Yeah, Google.
Right.
Google.
Let me do it. Please. I'm so embarrassed to not know. Come on. The birth and the death of Plato. Okay.
Well, the modern Almighty is
So
ChatGPT.
Born. I thought so. It was kind of 400s. Born 428 or 427 BC. Died 348 or 347. In fact, that's long living. That's like 80 years between, let's say, 428 and 348.
So they don't know his astrological sign. They don't got to narrow down to a month, huh? Just a year.
I forget.
He was a long time ago.
Man, I feel privileged to be an octogenarian like him.
Yeah. So he was, how old was he roughly? 80 something?
Yeah, maybe 79 technically, but 80.
Yeah.
428 to 348.
Gotcha.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's when the Greek world, in the 400s into the 300s, the Greek thinking was so ripe and new. And I remember reading a history book about Greece, and they asked the question, how is it that it was from Greece that some of this illuminative new ways of thinking about being human arose? And they said, partly environment, the clarity of that Mediterranean area, the constant illumination, that environment, the positive environment of the Greek Isles and Greece, the wonderful sun and the ocean and the constant freshness fed kind of the constant intellectual freshness to probe the human experience and understand it more deeply. So how do we wrap this up? I so delight in our conversation. I really do delight in it. And I hope it's of value to some listeners. It's having the fun of just exploring the depths of human experience that in so many ways culture, especially highly extrovert culture like America, disdains. I come from European roots. I was born in Europe and grew up as a kid in the Freudian years, I call it.
Sure.
The first near 8 years in Europe, then came to America. So I was youthized in America.
Okay.
So I'm an American youth, but a European infant and child,
Yeah.
and a universal cosmological adult.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not kidding.
Well, I wanted to ask you while we're in it, you said you were a clinician in 77. What, and, psychospiritual is what you've pointed to, or, where psychology meets spirituality is what you pointed to many times, and the environmental. What were you doing as a clinician at that time?
Between 77 and 83, those 6 years, I worked for a social service agency that was related formally to a faith community structure, but that social service acted as a social service, and part of the services that agency offered in Wisconsin was clinical counseling. And that's what I was for those 6 years, a clinical counselor. And then I added family life programming, and I had certain specialties. And then under the tutelage of a faith system, the bishop, took some of us clinicians spread throughout Wisconsin in the agency offices and said, we want you to also be available to clerics, faith community leaders. If a faith community leader gets into kind of a psychic funk or trouble, I want to put an official label on you that they can call and talk to you on behalf of the church hierarchy. And what was neat about this faith community leader is that he said, you can counsel clinically a faith community leader, a cleric, without having to report it.
Yeah.
If the cleric needs help, with the bishop, then you can be an advocate to walk with that person to the bishop and talk and share what's really going on. So that was part of my responsibility, was to work with ordinary people. Now, being in Madison, Wisconsin, ended up also working with some students from the University of Wisconsin with depression and anxiety stuff. Student life in a major university can be very stressful and can be very psychically hard. And at the age of 21, it is such a hard transitional time, that a lot of late teenagers and young adults really get into a lengthy, funky time, where they get depressed or anxious, and who am I and what do I want to do? And, and they take some hard courses and they get slam dunked, and then they feel awful about themselves. And then, it's just, it's not easy to be in a highly psychic transitional time between late adolescence and moving into adulthood. And it's even more hard now in our postmodern culture. Because the support systems, to the degree that I felt when I was 21,
Sure.
are not there.
Sure.
Economic support systems, social support systems, cultural support systems, even religious support systems. Back then, most universities had at least one chaplain or several chaplains to help students work out what, some people call doubting faith. John Westerhoff writes about doubting faith. It's natural as university students to be doubting this and doubting that and asking questions and trying to find answers. And funding was pulled out, and there are hardly any chaplaincies alive in the university communities to help dialogue with students.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been a chaplain in several arenas, and I love chaplaining, giving people a chance to talk about what you said at the very beginning, the deeper questions of life, seeking for the deeper answers, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but we're also human beings having a spiritual experience. It's a two-sided coin. We're human, we're creaturely, and we're spiritually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it struck me that we're almost sold into doubt and cynicism like slavery.
Oh, absolutely.
And that is the natural thing, and that's actually exactly what I was talking about at the beginning. Is it's the doubt that keeps you from being who you want to be, that leads to that addiction.
Absolutely.
And then there is no support, and there's no blame. Again, there's, from the perspective that there's no blame, I set my life up from a higher self perspective, and that's what I was saying with the not only the hallucinogens. That was almost just the stamp of validation. In many ways, it's just like you're saying. Is I think a lot of us have that that deeper intuition of a higher than this knowingness. But there's that validation that can come from meditative practices and really it's a sunset and love and yoga and hallucinogens. But then the thing I wouldn't mind ending on is the Facebook post, and I was talking about how was I gonna put this? Okay, so it's like what I was trying to come up with a way to, like, I don't want to spend my time on putting something on Facebook. I don't want to say this in a bad way, but it's like throw pearls at swine type of a feeling. Like I don't mean any individual that might read it, but I mean just like, where are we as a consciousness and on this platform? You know, as any beautiful individual, you don't want to put work into something that's going to lay at the feet of people who are going to trample it. And
some of that is probably inevitable.
Yeah, well,
people
that's
might
true.
Hear this and think that, well, geez, what mumbo jumbo, and they're kooky and they're out of it, and people are going to judge.
Well,
what I hope is there's enough people receptive where they gain something, are empowered somehow.
Well, yeah, and
Amplified.
I agree. Those are the people that are going to fight. There's definitely, no matter what you advertise or put out there, some people are not going to find any value in it. That's true. Then it comes down to, there are people that will find value in it. What is the proper platform and the way to help them find what you're putting out? But the thing is that what strikes me about, like I said at the beginning, is the drones, is I'm very focused on that and collecting as much information, because that's not little. Whatever that is not little. It's not something to be taken lightly. We have hundreds of drones flying over military bases, and not just in New Jersey, that's the big, but all over the world in different places.
Yeah.
And we don't know what they are, but they're not a threat. And oh, don't worry about it. Don't shoot it down. That's a federal crime.
Maybe go to Good and Evil.
Okay.
About drones. Oh, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, but so what I want to get to with that, what strikes me, and there's a thousand ways that this narrative could play out, is that we just a couple years ago, no matter what you think of COVID, no matter what your thoughts are about that and how you feel it affected your life, it was abused and misused by people in power, because people get scared. They and when they get scared, they lose their rational faculties, they lose their spiritual faculties, and they become animals looking for a savior. And when one will come around,
telling you this is what you need to be doing, and sort of, and that's the alarm bell that's going off for me.
Yeah, COVID, did quite a number on our culture.
Yeah.
And we are living in, you might say, the aftermath of it. It's kind of like a storm. And after the waves of a storm, a bad hurricane recede, you have all kinds of crap laying around. And I feel like that's a metaphor of what's happened to our culture. After the storm, the hurricane of COVID, we have lost our moorings, in some ways yet. And, the increase of mistrust to each other, the increased fragmentation that postmodernism feeds, and then we have our electronic tools that, in a sense, talk about masks. On the one hand, I'm Zoomly available to a lot of people, Facebook and Zoom, but I can really hide behind those public figures. Do we really engage as embodied beings anymore? In a sense, what COVID and electronics together has done is to de-emphasize our embodiment and our inter-embodiment. That when we are present, like you and I, with three-dimensionality, our communication is influenced not just by what we say and hear, but by facial maneuvers, by other gestures.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. In other words, we are in tune with each other's full humanity. And by doing that, we speak authentically and listen authentically, not perfectly. But when I'm on Zoom, I can present a pretty Olaf, and where I'm not that pretty, or on Facebook, I can present a smart Olaf, and he's not such a smarty, etc. Go back to, but COVID, like you said, COVID implies fear, and we have not handled that fear or other kinds of fear as well. But let me just make a comment about good and evil of drones. Stavridis, the retired admiral, who is a commentator on he wrote a book on the Third World War. I think, 2033? I'm not sure about the title, but I read it. The Third World War, okay? And he, being an admiral and a military, a very smart man, knows the war world. And the next book, his next war book, I don't know if it's the year 2053, but what is the key instrument of war? Drones, run by what possibly? AI. You take the humanity out of drones and just be technological killers. And we are into the world of Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back. Another termination.
Sure.
Objective termination. And it's already happened. There have been administrations who have used targeted drones to take out perceived terroristic enemies.
Yeah.
And now we have drones all over the place. And we have artistic drones to illuminate even a football game last night. Look at the drones.
There's a new story about
the drones of war to subjugate.
Yeah.
To illuminate and subjugate.
And to deliver your Amazon packages.
Evil and good.
Right.
Good and evil are real. They are real. And any spiritual system that refuses to acknowledge and work with that and deal with that is, I'll just say it strongly, is so limited and inaccurate, fallacious, that deep, textured spiritual systems must consider the ethical. What is good? What is evil?
Certainly. Well, that sounds like a perfect place to end.
Yeah, good place to end.
Yeah. What is good? What is evil?
Was this good or was it evil?
Was it good? Was it
I
evil?
guess it's in the eyes of the beholder or the ears of the listener. Yeah.
That's right. All right.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you.